So thinking about CEO compensation, I know you've done quite a lot of research on this, and you've got a project that is about to take off looking at CEO compensation as well. Can you give us an idea about the current practice with CEO compensation and whether it does appear to be too high?
Yeah, so what a lot of people focus on when they say that CEO pay is out of whack is they look at the CEO to employee pay ratio. So in the US, depending on what year you look at, it's 300 times the average worker. And people say, well, this is absolutely outrageous. How can it be that a CEO earns in one day what the average employee earns in a year? This is just unfair. But then their notion of fairness is equality. And for me, the correct measure of fairness is a reward which is proportionate to your contribution. So if I was to give all my students the same grade, that would be equal, but that would be unfair. So equality is not necessarily the measure of fairness. Now notice in different walks of life, people are very happy to accept inequality. So if you take, say, a football team in the UK, a midfielder or a striker will earn far more than the CFO of that football team, even though the CFO is really, really skilled. Why? Because they can recognise that the footballer is somebody who creates a huge amounts of value and he has some scarce talent. How do you know whether the footballer's pay is fair? You compare him to other footballers at other teams. You might look at the number of goals that he's scored, but you look at a measure of his particular worth, and then you compare the CFO's pay with CFOs in other organisations. So I think in order to determine whether pay is fair or not, we don't look at the link between CEO pay and employee pay, but the CEO pay versus other CEOs, and also his or her contribution, which is why the thing that I focus on in a lot of my work is not the level of pay, but the structure. So how strongly is pay linked to performance, and also is it linked to the correct measures of a performance? And particularly for me as an ESG advocate, there should be long-term measures of performance rather than short-term. So just to highlight one study, this is not done by me, but by other people in the Journal of Finance, they found when a CEO owns a lot of shares in her firm, so she has a lot of skin in the game, then she outperforms by 4 to 10 percentage points per year. So this is far more, many multiples of the average CEO salary. And so this suggests that if we really want to reform pay, then the better way to do this is to link pay much more to long-term performance rather than to tweak the levels.
It absolutely makes sense, because if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, so to speak. And if you're not rewarding the incentives or the performance, then they might not perform particularly well. You'll have a quiet life type situation. I remember some CEOs remarking that they only needed to be paid in cash because they would always exert effort. Do you buy that argument that a CEO who is really motivated just can be paid in cash because they're always going to work hard?
Yeah, so this is interesting because like my own profession is one where we don't have pay for performance. We're not paid for publications in top journals. We're not paid according to teaching ratings. And certainly for doctors, they're not paid according to patient survival. So I'm certainly somebody who thinks that intrinsic motivation will be important. However, how is this different in a corporate setting? Well, intrinsic motivation might lead a CEO to thinking, let me not screw up. So let me make sure that I don't take excessive risk to ensure that the company is still being here. I am going to be motivated to ensure the preservation of a company. But what shareholders and what society wants is not just preservation, but they want a bold company which takes risks. And so if you were the first, say, car company to develop electric cars, that might have been crazy back then when it was just safer for you to focus on petrol cars. And so without the incentive of being rewarded if things go really well, then if a CEO is only concerned about avoiding poor performance, then they won't take the important innovations necessary to address some of the wicked challenges of the world today. And also, this comes up in a recent paper I published called CEO Compensation Evidence for the Field, where we actually survey directors and investors. The reason why CEOs pay is linked to performance is not that they're greedy. It's not that they think, I'm so lazy that unless you give me an extra yacht for performing well, I'm not going to work. It's instead that the rewards happen ex post, is that if you've done a good job, then you would like to be rewarded for it. That's just fair and that's human. So if I do well in my teaching, then at the end maybe I get a teaching award and I get a plaque. Now, clearly, that plaque was not something that made any difference to my motivation to work hard. The monetary value of that is tiny, but it's something where after you've put a lot of effort into teaching, it is nice to be rewarded for that. And this is the same for CEOs, just like any other human. You like to be recognised for a job well done.